Trojans on Pac-12 South Life Support System. Now what? Pac-12 Conference midterm. Improving the Coliseum atmosphere. How does this USC season compare with the last 10 seasons? How does this week's bye week help the Trojans in getting ready for Notre Dame on October 23rd? And of course, our always popular predicting this week's Pac-12 conference games. Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle, week number 7. Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion with WeAreSC columnists and staff writers. Now let's start off with the pregame show, which means we meet our panelists for this week. Mark Culkin, WeAreSC columnist who writes the much-viewed Monday's Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways in addition to practice reports. Kevin Bruce, former all-conference linebacker and team captain for the 1975 USC Trojans. He's a WeAreSC columnist who writes defensively and offensively speaking after every USC game. Eric McKenney, publisher and editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com. And my name is Greg Katz. I write the WeAreSC columns, The Obvious and the Not So Obvious, and IMHO Sunday. Well, guys, that was the pregame exercise. It's time to get into it. The first quarter. Your panel's thoughts on the Utah game and what now? All right, let's start off with Eric McKenney.
The Utah game was the Stanford game, was the Oregon State game. It's the same thing you're seeing here. And at this point, I mean, you saw the game, and I'll let kind of people go into that and break that down if they want. But looking forward, you talk about what now. I don't know what now. I don't know if the coaches know what now. I don't know if the players know what now. You kind of are in this area, to kind of use a baseball comparison where you've pulled your starter in the first inning, and now you got to figure out how to have your bullpen get all the way through the rest of it, and you're kind of dealing with what you have coming into that game for USC coming into that season. So it's going to be sort of all hands on deck and trying to figure out as you move forward. But this is a pattern that we're seeing now, and it's kind of goes down to the core of this USC program right now. I think Utah came out and did everything they wanted to do offensively against USC. It's the same USC offensive issues that are cropping up, not being able to score touchdowns in the red zone, not a lot of big plays on offense, some hesitancy with the run game and not being able to really make the passing game fluid, even though you finished with 400 yards and you look at the total yards and you're okay with that. But the score is what it was. So again, it's the same things that we've been seeing. I don't think this Utah game provided us with any sort of new thoughts or commentary or anything about the team.
Okay. All right, Kevin, welcome back. Good to see your happy face there. So let's hear your happy thoughts on the Utah game and what now, my friend?
Well, look, just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it does. And they actually did play poorer than some of the other beatdowns that took place. So regrettable to have to be the bearer of that breaking story, but there it is. This is a matter of triage now, right? So what's important is to identify some pieces and parts that can be identified and improved upon. You're not going to boil the ocean here. This team is not going to get good, frankly, probably for the rest of the season. It just needs to get better, right? And it starts with each player, trying to do an assignment that they understand. I think the first piece would be to understand, what those assignments are. The coaching staff has got to figure out how to put some pieces in place. I'll tell you that while the offense was disappointing on Saturday, the defense obviously is the critical component here. Some of the offensive shortcomings are driving some of the defensive pressure, but the pressure on the defense. But the defense is absolutely falling apart. And there's a number of different issues. I won't get into it now. Maybe we will later. Maybe we won't. But there are some areas there that can be improved. But whether it's adequate enough to produce a winning record for the season, I don't know. Right now, I'd say it is not.
Okay, well, all right. And we saved, of course, our third comment will come from Mr. L.A. Mark Culkin, are you ready?
I'm
Set.
ready.
Pontificate.
Yeah. So, Eric, first of all, there's no reason to get nasty and bring up the Dave Roberts analogy of pulling a pitch too early. We had a rough.
I never specifically said anybody,
I
but
knew
if you want to take
with
that.
that. I knew where you were going with that. It's okay. But yeah, and to use one of Kevin's words, it was disappointing to see another slow start on offense, the lack of creativity, the overuse of Drake London, the underuse of Darwin Barlow. I mean, this is a guy who, when he got on the field, you saw the offense start to move. I believe they scored a touchdown on that drive. We can bring up the red zone deficiency again. You kind of know you're in for a long day when Mr. Consistency, Mr. Perfect, Parker Lewis misses a chippy. And, I can go into some details about that as well, maybe a little bit later, when you kind of bring to the attention to the referee that, hey, this ball's a little underinflated. That might play a part in how things play out. So yeah, those things go on. I know this bothered Kevin a lot. It bothered me even more. And I didn't play for USC. Was watching the defense, the lack of no adjustment, the lack of no Max Gibbs. I mean, you work the guy out all week with first team, second team reps, and all you're going to do is roll him out there to maybe block a point after attempt. To me, the players see this. I see this. There's no trust among that team right now. So when you don't have any trust, there's going to be a lack of desire. There's going to be a lack of pride, and you're going to see 3 straight butt kickings at home. I mean, to give up 40 plus points, 3 consecutive home games, that's unheard of. It's never happened till this year.
Well, there's still time to do it on the road.
Yeah, well, ironically, they play better on the road, and that's
They haven't played the teams. They haven't played the teams they're going to play, including Notre Dame coming. I mean, come on, geez.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm not arguing. I guess, I mean, as far as this goes, the 5 stages of grief, I'm still in denial when they're on the road. I've come to full acceptance overall with this team, though. So, yeah, as far as going forward, who knows? Just, grab on and hold tight and let's ride it out.
Well, as you can tell, I have a phone call sound. That's our new sound, by the way, if you have talked beyond your 1:30 or 2-minute warning there. So I appreciate whoever that was trying to give us a hint to move on. But I will kind of wrap it up a little bit by saying, this team is what it is after 6 games. Nothing surprises me. Nothing shocks me. Do I think it's going to get better? I don't know why it would get better. It's the same players. It's the same coaches. And that's not to put a negative view on it of a bad situation. But the bottom line to it is where they go from here, they're going to have to look inside themselves. I predicted in the first quarter and a half by how physical USC was going to be, were they going to match up with Utah. And Utah sensed, and judging by the quotes afterwards by Kyle Whittingham, the Utah coach, we knew that if we got into the second half, we could basically punch our way through these guys, and they did. I think it's disappointing for the people that attended the game that they had to come to their 3rd consecutive. Really, it's 4 games that SC has lost in the Coliseum. If you don't, I count last year's no attendance for the championship game as a loss in the Coliseum. But with attendance, it's how disappointing it could be. I had many people tell me, that the new annual ritual isn't the lighting of the torch to begin the fourth quarter in the Coliseum. It's the beginning of starting your car in the parking lot to head home after the third quarter. And that is a rather disturbing thought. So, you know what? Where we go from here, now what? That's going to be up to these coaches and these players to decide. I think everything that the panel has said is certainly noteworthy and spot on. But at this point in time, it's about the future. There are 6 games left. What do they want to do with it? I mean, it's conceivable now, and I'll wrap this portion up. It's conceivable that they could not be bowl eligible. And again, that could be a blessing, actually, if that's the way things are going. So with that, we will move on now to the second quarter, which gives us kind of a different outlook on how things are going. Oh, that was a weak bill. I'm doing it again. There we go. Let's take a look at the first half of the Pac-12 season at this point, and I will, for our viewers, our listeners, and for our panel, let's kind of go over where the standings reside. Well, in the North Division, Oregon State is atop the pack at 2-1 in conference, 4-2 overall. Stanford is second, 2-2, 3-3 overall. Washington State, surprisingly, 2-2, 3-3 overall. Oregon, 1-1 in conference, 4-1 overall. Washington 1-0, 2-3 overall. In California, 0-2 and 1-4 in overall. The Pac-12 South, ASU, not surprisingly, is 3-0, 5-1 overall. Utah 2-0, 3-2 overall. UCLA is 2-1, 4-2 overall. USC 2-3 in conference, 3-3 overall. Arizona 0-1. 0-4 in overall, and Colorado is 0-2, 1-4. The standings are based on conference wins first, then overall. So a little bit of a long dissertation on where we are, but I wanted to make sure everybody was clear on how things were looking. So, Mark, you were really on a roll there at the end, and I don't want to take away from that momentum that you're carrying. So what is your overall feelings on how you see the Pac-12 at this point? Any surprises, any disappointments? Your call.
No, there's no surprises. The Pac-12 is just a much better version of what it is, and that's just a better version of crap right now. Like you had mentioned, Oregon State is at the top of the North Division, and while that's kind of cool, no one really anticipated that. Oregon is going to, have a few more wins, but what are they going to do this year? They got more injuries than they know what to do with. Yeah, I don't know what to say about the Pac-12. It's horrible. It's a conference of mediocrity, and the bell cows. USC is trending down. No one anticipates anything from this conference overall, so I don't know how to answer that question other than, fortunately, USC's got a lot of their conference games out of the way, and they still have 2 more out of conference games compared to conference games. So maybe that's something to look forward to.
All right, with that positive outlook by young Mr. Culkin, let's go to Eric. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, the Pac-12 is the Pac-12. I mean, I think this is kind of what everybody expected coming in. I will say for USC, it doesn't matter how bad the Pac-12 is. You look at Oregon this year. If Oregon had beat Stanford, they'd be, number 2 in the country right now? We've seen that you can be a really great team in a really bad conference and get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to national rankings and that sort of thing. So I don't pay much attention to how good the conference is, because if you're good, if you're a good program, if you're a good team, you can still resonate nationally. And that's something that USC, I think that's all they have to focus on. As far as the conference, like you said, you've got 2 undefeated teams still in the conference. You have no undefeated teams overall. Looking at their overall record, it's fun when there's an Oregon State story, but people don't take you seriously nationally for an Oregon State story. I mean, that's not something. You've got kind of Kentucky in the SEC, maybe doing something like that. But there's Georgia down there. There's still Alabama down there. You can't let a program like Oregon State having a slightly surprising year sort of lead the national headlines for your conference. I think at this point, kind of watching what Arizona State does compared to what's going on off the field with them and NCAA potential violations and certainly looking into what's going on there, that might be kind of the most interesting story, that juxtaposition of that cloud hanging over them and them still, shooting out to a 5-1 start, 3-0 in conference. But ultimately, and I know for us, when USC is having the season it's having right now, how the Pac-12 is doing to me is fifth rate story in terms of looking at that.
Well, I think that we can all agree on that.
Yes.
All right, so we have come to that perspective from our editor-in-chief. Now let's go to our resident USC former football captain, Kevin. Now you have had a chance to look at this Pac-12 this season. Your summation of where we are in the first half of the season?
I think the biggest surprise for me is how well ASU is playing. And there may be a cloud hanging over their heads. They're not playing like it. I don't think actually the players even think about it. The coaches might in terms of gainful employment downstream, I suppose, but they're playing really good football. And I give them credit for that. That's pretty interesting, I think. That's a bit of a surprise to me. I thought they would show some chinks in the armor, and there's still time for that, but they played some good football. Good for them. The other surprise is how poorly we played. I did not expect our team to be this bad. And I had to laugh when I forget if it was Mark or somebody said we got two road games left, and there's some excitement potential there. Look, I'm not excited about us going to South Bend in a week and a half, and I'm not excited about playing BYU. I guess that's a home game, I suppose, but whatever. I can't see what this team is doing and get excited about this season. What I can get excited about, I will get excited about at the appropriate time, is what happens on the go forward basis. With respect to how that impacts the Pac-12, it's a big deal because, as you said, USC should be, one of the marquee programs that does get national attention, whether it likes it or not. Right now, it gets national attention as, frankly, a laughing stock in terms of the play that they're putting out on the field. So, other than that, I don't have a real good opinion on it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I am going to take a step away from the USC perspective and just talk as just a purveyor of the Pac-12. I'm excited to see Oregon State doing well. I was hoping they would beat Washington State, which they didn't. I loved how people were saying Stanford is going down with the ship and Shaw isn't a good coach, because he is. And now they've rallied. They're second in the North. I'm kind of glad that Oregon has been exposed as being talented but questionable game management. Washington looked like they were going downhill, but they've kind of rallied. We'll find out what they're all about against UCLA this weekend. And Cal, I think, is how shall I compliment Cal? Cal is being Cal. They play defense. They can't really score all that much. In terms of the Pac-12 South, nothing has shocked me. ASU, I thought, was the best talented team. We don't know what's going to happen in the next month and a half or so if the NCAA drops the big bomb on their program for the recruiting violations during the COVID dead period. You know what? I'm going to say that I am kind of got a soft spot here for Utah, because they've had such tragedy within the last year that somehow it always seems to me that when teams have real tragedy, the football gods step in and make it a bittersweet year. So if they won the Pac-12 South, I would be happy for them, given their situation. UCLA, of course, needs to win for Chip Kelly, because that could be a real hornet's nest for them in Westwood, depending on what's going to happen with his status. I mean, Arizona, okay, the bubble is popped. You're bad. Colorado, you're bad. I don't see how Durrell is going to last there, but that's just my opinion. And as far as the Trojans are concerned, look, they are what they are. And, I go along with my colleagues here in saying that, you know what? USC mathematically may still be in this race, but they're really put a fork in them. I think they're done, but that doesn't mean they're done finishing the season on an up note. I just saw that some people are saying they're going to play Fresno State in the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl at the end of the season at the new SoFi Stadium. So that would be something for them to shoot for. I'm sure the players could get up for playing in an NFL stadium, but all in all, I think the Pac-12 has morphed itself into the bastard child of the Mountain West Conference. All right, let's move on to halftime. So we've got all this stuff going on with SC on the field, but guys, what do you think you would do to enhance the Coliseum atmosphere at home games? Let's try to, aside from have a better team, have a better record. What would you do or don't do for the Coliseum? And I know, Kevin, you're out there in the Dallas area right now, but you've been to enough games and have experienced them. When we get to your thoughts, guys, try to figure out what can you do to enhance the atmosphere for the fans. So, Kevin, since I brought your name up, and I do want to apologize, some of your feed is now looks like it's good, Kevin. It was freezing up a little bit. For those of you on the podcast, it doesn't mean anything. Those of you that were watching, it's not your computer. So don't have a meltdown on it. But it looks like it's fixed now, and that's good news. And so, Kevin, give us some good news. How would you change the atmosphere?
The torch in the first quarter. That could be fun. I'd like to see the more of the horse. I'm just, old school kind of guy. I just think that the horse got out there, Saturday for a wee bit, and that was nice to see. Fans enjoy that, and I think that's it's a nice touch. It's a Trojan touch, and I think you get a benefit out of that. I'll stay away from team performance because that was your stipulation. But clearly, having a competitive product on the field would certainly always steps up the enjoyment for fans in the stands. I noticed the attendance was recorded at 51,000+ on Saturday, and that's second highest of the year.
All right. Well, okay. Now that was some interesting perspectives there. Mark, you were in the press box. You've been a regular for decades. What would you do to change the atmosphere inside the old Collie?
First, not to really correct Kevin, but the announced crowd was 54,088.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paid crowd was 51,000. Paid crowd 51,000.
Yeah, it was bad. But to Greg's larger question, number one, bring back the fan experience, which seems like USC has gone the opposite direction. Tailgating is almost non-existent. For anybody who walks around pregame, on campus, there's a little bit more activity. The South Lawn, which used to be coveted ground, is basically empty ground now. You walk by, the recruit tailgates, the parents tailgates. These places are just graveyards. So I guess the first thing is they need to work on their messaging. Eric and I spoke about this. Carson Palmer was being honored during the beginning of the game for his induction to the College Football Hall of Fame. The way the team comes out of the tunnel, it just seems like it's very piecemeal together. And we looked at each other, hey, you know what? Maybe they'll play a little bit of Lose Yourself from Eminem, the old school Trojan entrance. They did twice later after the team was already on the field. It's just, they can't. USC has a lot of great ideas, but they just can't seem to get them all on the same page and pointed in the right direction. So again, aside from winning and being competitive on the field, maybe just go back a little bit and make the fans feel welcome, because right now it's like there's all these rules in place. Forget the rules that California and LA County put in place. It's kind of the stuff that USC does on top of that. That just, it's not a, going to the game isn't fun right now. Obviously they're not winning, but it just seems like it's more of a chore than an actual experience.
All right, Eric, is it a chore?
Well, we get a pretty good view in the press box, and we're there. So I can't speak to kind of individual fans that are doing that. A couple of things that I've seen. I love the idea when SC has that night game. There's the peristyle means so much to the Coliseum. I'd love to see that thing kind of lit up from the inside. I know it seems like looking at it, it's maybe lit from the outside, but putting a focal point on that, especially for night games, I think could kind of light up the interior there. But I think ultimately, since you cut our legs and pretty much our whole torso out from under us by not saying improved play on the field. That's not my whole thought there. But I really like the idea of USC bringing back some former players. The pool there is so deep and maybe as deep as any program in the country. When you get a guy like nailed it. When you get a guy like Carson Palmer coming back, and that's for a specific reason. It was for College Football Hall of Fame induction, and they were going to do a presentation between the first and second quarter. They had him on pregame, and they did some stuff with him. Boy, it feels like you could roll out 4 or 5 guys like that for every game during a home season. It's 6, maybe 7 games that you have to fill there. You can go pretty deep bringing guys back and do it in a variety of ways. Maybe get one of them to come out of the tunnel. Another guy can do, a quick interview with the head coach before, ask him a question. Guys could kind of be, around the stadium in various places. It feels like there's such a pool there that you could go to. And you don't get that sense, up the tunnel, you've got kind of that mural where you see some of the guys. You certainly, the Heisman trophy winners, those jerseys there in the peristyle end, those are big, but feels like that's kind of tip of the iceberg for what USC could do to connect fans with former players and all the history there.
Well, those are all good ideas. I will chime in with a couple that I have that I think I like the lighting up the peristyle at night. That would, I hope Mike Bone and Brandon Sosna are listening to our brilliant ideas here. They could have a free beer night. That's a possibility. But I think that a couple of my ideas were, and I think Kevin, you might be able to relate to this. I think it was 1973 in that time period where they used to introduce the players, one of the units, offensively or defensive players, player by player that you see in NFL games. Do you remember that, Kev?
I do. Excuse me. I do. And you are correct. Those years, and I don't know how plus or minus 73, but clearly that year and others, we were introduced. Typically, Coach McKay would want to introduce seniors versus starters, whether it was offense or defense. So that was a point of distinction that he took, which was actually pretty interesting, I thought.
Yeah, I think that if, especially for a night game, if you spotlighted the players running onto the field, that would give it. I take Mark's idea of bringing back Eminem to bring the entire unit on. I think also what they could do, as I look at my notes here, they can get rid of that DJ before the game. I know that's probably popular with today's kids, but I personally, I think it sucks, but that's just an old person's viewpoint of it. I would like to see outside the Coliseum or inside the walking area, statues of great USC legendary players or even athletes. Now, I know that would cost some money, but then again, when I see that statue in front of the McKay Center with John McKay there, and I go, wow, that's great. How about some statues like that? I know, and we'll talk about this next week about Notre Dame and such, that, when you go to Notre Dame, Notre Dame Stadium has many statues that surround the stadium, Newt Rockne, Lou Holtz, some of the players, and it really does add an ambiance to it. I also think that they need to get the band more involved sometimes in some areas. I'd like to see the band be behind the USC bench. I think they're out there in Toolsville, kind of like a sideshow, and I think they deserve better than that. After all, I think that's where a lot of teams would put USC on road games, let alone their own home games. So those are just some of my ideas, and I think that there's others that we can discuss at a later period of time. So we're going to move on to the third quarter, and this is kind of an overall thing about where USC is. We know what this season's all about. We know how it's going, and we're hoping it doesn't. The second half, it doesn't mirror or get worse than the first half. But guys, how does this USC season at the midway point compare with any other seasons of the last 10 years? And let's start off here with Eric. How do you see it?
I mean, it's kind of a bizarro world greatest hits of what we've seen in the last 10 years. It's just a combination of so many things. I mean, you got the coaching change partway through the season, and that's the third time that we've seen that. You've got kind of the defensive breakdowns that we've seen. You've got kind of getting off to a slow start, but I think this season feels different than anything that we've seen the last 10 years. This season feels like such a crossroads right now, where you have this decision to be made at the end of the year that feels like it's going to dictate the next, I don't know, 15, 20 years of USC football, potentially, and potentially more than that. And I don't know if I have felt kind of the weight of that in any season. And I also don't think that USC has gotten off to as bad of a start in conference, to where you're here halfway through the season and the season's done. Even when USC got off to that 1-3 start, 2016, you still had kind of thought like, okay, you right the ship and you can still win the South. That loss to Utah, I think, made this year, just in terms of on the field, feel different than the last decade, where there's just no real reason to believe that they're going to find an answer. You can hope for it, but the idea that, okay, they can still turn this around and get something going to where the season can be viewed as a success, at the end of it, that makes this one feel a little bit different.
All right, Mark, how about you? I know you have some great retrospective on where we are today compared to the last 10 years.
Yeah, the eternal optimist in me when the season started was there was a small glimmer of hope that because the schedule was set up the right way, you had the right mixture of personnel, you were playing the same offensive system and defensive system 2 years in a row going into a second year, at least with the defense, that they would have been better off. They would have come out of the gate much better than they have. And they've just been progressively getting worse. So when you have that hope, and then that's immediately ripped away from you, and then just knowing that they were going to make a decision at the end of the year with the coaching staff, and it was made literally at the beginning of the year after 2 games. This sets this season apart, different from not just the last decade, but I don't know, you can go back a long time with that. I mean, even Paul Hackett made it through the end of his year, when it was done. Clay Helton didn't even survive it. So you just hope going forward. As I mentioned, we're mostly through the conference. We've got 2 more out of conference games coming up that, hopefully USC can find their way in 2 weeks to have some luck on their side, Kevin. I know you're not looking forward to it, but again, that's the optimist in me. It's hold on and just get through the season. And maybe, I know they're going to use the bye week to kind of look at the younger players and have a scrimmage. Well, let's see if they implement some more personnel changes after the bye week. Otherwise, if you don't, that trust factor that I spoke about earlier, it's just going to continue to frazzle. So, yeah.
Okay. Kev, your thoughts?
Well, this team is a team unto itself. I don't think that I've seen in my watching lifetime a team of this type. It not only regrettably plays poorly any number of times, too many times, and points are rolled up on them. There were substantial portions of the game, and I'm speaking specifically of the defense, where the defense quit, and you could see it. It wasn't everybody, but it doesn't take everybody. It takes one, and then two, and then three, and then you have a total train wreck because defense is built that way. It requires all 11 players to play, and it's an assignment. Should be an assignment-based situation. So when I look at this team, I go, look, as I said earlier, right now for this season, it's triage. For what comes next, that's what this year is all about. This season, the rest of the season is all about. It's about what comes next. And look, I'd love to think that we're going to go into South Bend and play a heck of a game and walk away with a W. But I got to tell you what, we could be one of the best teams in the country. And going into South Bend, you're down 14 points right from the get-go. That's how tough that place is to play. And this team, many of these players have never been to South Bend to play football against Notre Dame. And you think Utah's tough? Really? Oh my gracious. So, okay, look, you take what you have, you look at it, to Mark's point, look, you got a bye week. What are you going to do with that? Well, you got to get some guys healed up. Okay, fine. That's obvious. But you got to take some look at other players that might be able to produce that are younger, have an opportunity to play. Some of these seasoned veterans, I tell you what, our safety play right now, I'm not going to use names, but is the worst I've ever seen. And I mean it, the worst I have ever seen. And I'm an old guy. That could be rectified to some extent by putting in other players that are willing to don't make some mistakes. We're making them anyways. Might as well get some mistakes done at high speed, right? As an example. I'd love to see those kinds of things through the bye week. What I don't want to see is Jackson Dart brought into a position to contribute in South Bend when his knee's not ready.
All right. Well, let me go back and give you my perspective on it. How does this USC season at the midway point compare with seasons of the past 10 years? I don't think we've ever seen a season like this, but I will say it's a culmination of the last 10 seasons. It's been a drip, drip, drip. I don't want to give away any, how shall I say it, previews of my column on Friday for the obvious, not so obvious, shameless hint. But the blame game is going to begin. And you can start all the way back to Max Nikias. And I pretty much lay it out there. People are going to say, man, I read it to my girlfriend a little bit, and she was, holy mackerel. And I said, is there anything that I true? And she goes, no, it's all true. And that's the sad part. It isn't trying to stretch it or point it in a direction. It's basically historical facts and science, but I've never seen a USC season compared to the other 10 where been dismissed in early part. The second, if you're going to fire the guy in the second game after the game or what have you, why did you even hit back in the first place? That's ludicrous to me. But it's been a series of the last 10 years of one mismanagement adult decision after another. It's almost comical. What do they say? Truth is stranger than fiction. The Sarkisian thing, the Kiffin firing, the three coaches in one season, then we go with the kids. It's not often that I think that USC football players, quit I think as a former coach myself for a long time, you teach your players that you go to the end. 4 quarters, you're going to fight on. And we're not seeing that. I think there are players on this team. When I look at the last 10 years, I think there's players on this team that love football, that they're going to play even if SC is 0-9 because they love football. There are other players that like football, which means if they're stimulated at any particular time in the game or the game is on the line in the last quarter, then they'll start playing. They're stop and start players, and you can't win that way. And then you have players now that are probably saying to themselves, well, you know what? I'm going to get my SC degree, and I think I'm just ready to go out in the workforce, and whatever happens, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I got my scholarship and what have you. And when you break it down that way, it's hard to have a successful team. So, yes, I think this is, compared to the other 10 years, a culmination of the previous 9, and it is a sad state of affairs. I know personally for me, like I've said many times, I've been following these guys since 1962 as a 12-year-old, and now I'm into the, decade number 7, and it makes me freaking angry to think that I have watched SC at its very best. I thought I had seen them at their very worst, but this is pretty bad. And to all the older gray hairs like myself, it's infuriating, even though we're not throwing shoes out the window and, lighting up streets on fire. It's a bad situation, but it is what it is at this point in time. So let's head into the fourth quarter and try to turn our attention to, first, let's mentally light the Coliseum torch. How does this bye week help in preparing the Trojans for their big game at Notre Dame on October 23rd? Mark, what do you think?
This is a huge week, just mentally. Forget about, giving some of the guys time off to kind of heal their wounds and so forth. They need to use this week to get everybody back on the same page, point in the same direction. Some of the stuff you hear about after these games, it kind of sends shivers up your spine a little bit, from a fan perspective. From a media perspective, you'd never think you'd hear some of the things you're hearing. It's not just the players who aren't maybe all on the same page. It might be the staff as well. And, some of that's to be expected. Their futures are unknown right now, other than they know they won't be coaching at USC next year. But they need to make sure that, and I don't know how Dante can do this, the changes that he's trying to incorporate, he needs to make sure that it's coming across as honest, because I think right now there's a lot of words and the actions need to be able to back it up. And so far during his tenure, I don't think he's done that. So, I touched on it earlier. If you're going to have the scrimmage, you're going to take a look at the younger guys and figure out who can contribute going forward. You have to use them going forward. Maybe take Drake London out for a couple of series, during the game and see what the guys can do for the betterment of the team. So I again, going forward, right now, it's get the team back on the same page, know that this is they have a chance to take something that's been really bad, beat Notre Dame in South Bend, and it won't salvage the season, but it's something to build off of.
Well, I think that you make a good case for that. Kev, how do you deal with this bye week and how do you prepare?
Yeah, it's you really got to pick your poison. Coach Don Williams has to think about what he wants to do. And let's face it, Coach Williams was not prepared to be head football coach at University of Southern California. All right. And he'd be probably one of the first guys to tell you that, right? So you take a step back, and as I said earlier, you got to focus on the things that I can fix and the things that I really, we're not going to be able to change certain things. Example would be, you going to put in a new offense? No, obviously not. We got what we have. We can emphasize some things differently. We can put in some blocking schemes that might be a little different. That's what I would do. I would put in some blocking schemes where I would have some fun. I would get Gibbs on the field as an H-back and have him do some inside trap blocks because, frankly, the rest of the team would find it hilarious and a lot of fun, and he probably would pancake about 2 or 3 guys from time to time. I mean, but it would be fun. It would put some excitement into a team that really would help them. And from a practice perspective, that makes the practice a little bit more enthusiastic as well. There clearly is a need for some, you're rolling in some of the younger guys, but I tell you what, there's a need to bring some of these more veteran players who are not producing and just say, look, guys, your job. We hear all the time about how it's competition. Then I see the same guys playing and starting. That's inconsistent to what Mark was saying earlier. What I would want to see is some people younger people who have played hard, practiced hard, prepared hard. They're gonna make some mistakes, but I'd rather see mistakes at full speed than what we're seeing right now. And I think this week gives an opportunity to do that. And then of course, there's a healing side of things. Bye weeks are very funny. It's tough to get super excited when you don't have a game to play. But on the other hand, after having been throttled, there's such a bad taste in your mouth, and that just lingers. And this team has got to pick up the pace here and say, look, we can you sit around crying in our beer, or we can go get something done. They haven't demonstrated the ability to have done that so far this season, and they need to. And they have a huge challenge coming up in a couple weeks, week and a half or so.
Eric?
Yeah, the bye week is interesting, especially when you consider Notre Dame at the tail end of it, where you're kind of doing 2 things at once. And it's, to me, listening to Dante Williams in that Sunday media call, it's concerning a little bit when he talks about, at the end of that Utah game, we didn't go to Miller Moss because we're still trying to win that game. And this is, you're talking about taking over a drive when you're down 20 something points toward the end of the game. And you just, it's not giving up, it's not quitting, but it is kind of reimagining and refocusing yourself on a bigger picture rather than just that one. I mean, when you are trying to, score with a minute, 50 seconds left or 50 seconds left or whatever that was at the end, and you're still throwing it with your starting quarterback, that's kind of that same thing where you're talking about now figuring out how to handle this bye week and also Notre Dame. I don't think that you can just say, let's play all of our freshmen and all of our young players against Notre Dame. I do think you need to prep with the guys you trust and the guys that have I don't want to say the guys that have gotten you here because that's not a positive thing right now, but those guys that you trust. I think that you're fine to go ahead and go into Notre Dame with those guys, see what you can do, see if you can right the ship a little bit. And I don't think you just roll out a bunch of young guys there. That being said, this bye week, you do have to start getting those guys ready because you do, I think, have to shift your focus from, how can we have the best 2021 season to how can we best prepare this program for the future and start seeing what those young guys can do. And I honestly, you kind of take your shot against Notre Dame. If things don't go well there, you've got what seems like a pretty soft landing spot the next week hosting Arizona. Boy, I'd certainly expect, again, if you do lose to Notre Dame, to run out a ton of young guys against Arizona. And so I think that's hopefully what this bye week can do here is you really do get a sense of what some of the younger guys do. And if you can trust them, throwing them out there and into a game. But again, I certainly, I wouldn't expect 8-9 freshmen to start or anything like that against Notre Dame. But I'd love to see kind of Dante Williams sort of wrapping his head around that balance of what can you actually do this year, and is it beneficial long-term to the program to put everything into, the end of the fourth quarter of these games or the rest of the season when maybe it is more beneficial for the long-term health of USC. Hey, let's see what else is here and let's get some of these other guys, some game experience. Because that's one of the major knocks on Clay Helton when he didn't blow out bad teams often enough, or when he didn't get out to big leads. There are if you go back, you talked about one of the things you threw out comparing the last 10 years, and Clay Helton wasn't the head coach for all 10 years, but when you start thinking about the number of lost reps for young guys in games like that they didn't have the experience because they couldn't get out to a big lead and they couldn't put teams away, that starts adding up, and that absolutely takes a toll on your program. So if this year is going to be a lost year in terms of you can't fight for a Pac-12 South championship, you can't fight for a conference championship, and again, it's not mathematically done at this point, but looks likely. If it's going to be that kind of year, you do have to start thinking about 22 and 23 and 24 and down the road and how you can get guys ready to contribute then.
Well, I tell you what, you can take a look at this question and look at it from different perspectives. I'm going to put on my hat when I was getting my master's degree in athletic administration and coaching, and that is to look at the bye week, in my opinion, isn't so much about the physical changes or switches. It's about the emotional state of the team. This should be a time when the team gets together and has those proverbial meetings. This is the time when the coaching staff gets together and say, hey, what are we doing good? What are we really not doing good? What changes can we make emotionally with this team? Now, obviously, if you change some players on the field, you change the emotion of the team. But that's not a bad thing if you take players and say, look, I'm thinking of one player, I, like Kevin, will keep the player nameless, but on the defensive end of the spectrum, and said, look, you're just not doing the job. We're going to put somebody else in there. It sends a big message to the team emotionally, like, whoa, they're willing to make changes. It's all about a mindset. And I would say if they went into Notre Dame, one or two things are going to happen. Either they're going to have one of the greatest upsets in the history of the series, which will be a huge Band-Aid on a broken artery, or they're going to go behind Chris Fowler's woodshed and get the living this, that, and the other thing kicked out of them. And they're going to have to decide. And all of us have been to Notre Dame. We know, I've seen the highs and I've seen the lows. And I know one thing, when that Notre Dame fans start yelling, here come the Irish, and they start playing, all the Irish songs that they do, the clog and the victory march. I mean, if you're losing, it's like, can I just crawl into a fetal position? Somebody put me on a wheelbarrow, cover me up, and wheel me out of that little tunnel that leads into the stadium. It is a horrifying experience. I would hope that emotionally this team can get it together this week and then do what they do. I mean, how much can you change, really? It's all about attitude. I mean, how many times have you heard teachers say it's your attitude that's what's causing you not to learn or what have you? It's the same thing here. I think Dante Williams is in a no-win situation. He's going to tell people that are supposed to be his superiors, not only in position but financially, this is what you're going to do. I can't see him telling Todd Orlando, here's what you're going to do. And I think he emphasizes the running a little bit more in the games for Todd Harrell. And maybe we see a little bit of it, but I'll tell you, the day of reckoning is going to be on October 23rd when the Trojans march, walk, skip into South Bend, Indiana. And I don't even know, I'm not even sure that Dante Williams has ever been to Notre Dame. I mean, that's another factor. I mean, if you've never coached at Notre Dame and you walk onto that field, believe me, and if they're rolling, and I tell you what, as goofy as their season has been, you talk about emotions. Hey, I'll tell you what would be better if you're a Notre Dame football player than to kick the living crap out of USC, your arch rival. It may not get you to the college football playoffs, but I'll tell you what will get you a lot of satisfaction for the 2021 season. I can tell you that. And Kevin, you've been on both sides of the fence. You've been on the very highs and the very lows, and you know what the feeling is on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I played at South Bend twice against Notre Dame, lost one game. by the way, the score was close, so it wasn't like it was a blowout, and we were competitive and trying to win toward the end. Didn't quite get there, and it was miserable, totally miserable. To your point, Greg. Conversely, in my senior year, we went back there and beat a Joe Montana led Notre Dame team, and that feels a whole lot better. But it takes more than what I think this team even knows about. They've not experienced it. They have no visceral understanding of what's involved. But the only way you get that is going out and do it. And there it is. And I'd love to be the optimistic and say, yeah, I see it coming. Yeah, no, I don't. But, the game's still on the schedule. We're going to show up and we're going to kick the ball off. We're going to go play. So there is that opportunity. It's not a zero chance. Okay.
Well, that leads me into just a kind of quick wrap up on this is next week for the Inside the Trojans Huddle, because it's a bye week. We're going to take next week to really have what I would call an Inside the Trojans Huddle Notre Dame special. Everything you want to know from a player's perspective, a fan's perspective, the Notre Dame weekender, what that's like. And I think it's something that everybody's going to enjoy. So, well, on that note, the bell tells us it's time to wrap it up with the overtime period, our Pac-12 predictions. Of course, USC and Oregon State have byes this week. So we're going to go with the panel here. And we're going to first start off on Friday night, this Friday, another strange Friday night game in the Pac-12, Friday night at night or whatever they call the darn thing. Cal is at Oregon. It's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. Oregon is favored by 13.5 points. Mark Culkin, what do you think about that prediction?
Sure. I haven't seen enough of Cal. I've seen enough of them to know that their offense is worse than USC's offense. It's worse in a different way. So I think Oregon will do enough to win at home.
Okay,
even
Kev?
with all their injury deficiencies right now.
You got it.
Yeah, I'd have to say they're going to do a little bit more than just win at home. I think it's going to be ugly, and poor Cal's going to have to find a different way to get home.
Eric, are they going to have to get a roadmap out in the GPS and find their way home? What do you think?
Oregon's injuries are going to catch up with them eventually, but Cal seems bad. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen this week.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think that 13.5 points might be too small, because I don't think Cal's offense is enough at Autzen Stadium to make it interesting in the second half. So I think Oregon's going to win going away. Let's turn to Saturday, October 16th. Arizona at Colorado, 12:30 p.m. Pac-12 networks. Colorado's favored by 7.5. Mark, what say you?
First team that scores wins.
Sounds reasonable to me. Kevin, what do you think?
I like Colorado.
Okay.
The altitude is their 12th player.
Reasonable. Eric?
Yeah, I think we have the two Pac-12 games of the year. This is one of them. You got the fight for the top and the fight for the bottom. I like Colorado. They're at home. Arizona just had the quarterback injury news. So yeah. I suppose in college one team's got to win. So I'll go with Colorado.
Well, it does sound like an elimination game for the seller. So I am going to pick. I think if the game was at Arizona, I might give Arizona a chance, but it's at Colorado, so I'm going to say the high altitude will suck some of the desert breath out of Arizona. So I'm going to go with Colorado 7.5, but it's a meaningless game in my opinion. Here's one that's interesting: Stanford at Washington State, 4:30 p.m. ESPNU. Stanford 2-point favorite. Mark, do you agree with those odds?
Yeah, it's an odd game. I mean, just when you think Oregon State has kind of figured it out, they ran into their nemesis in Pullman and they lost. So, where's that game being played?
At Pullman, in Pullman. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna take the underdog. I'm gonna go with the Cougs.
All righty. Kevin, are you going for the Cougs?
No, I go with the trees on that one.
All right, trees over the Cougars. All right, very good. Eric?
Yeah, I think Washington State with Jane Delore at quarterback, it's not a different program, and that's like going from an NAIA school to an FBS school. That is such an upgrade for them. I think Washington State can beat Stanford.
I agree. I think that Delore really is the key to that team. I mean, he was obviously a big factor last week in the upset against Oregon State. But you know what? The Stanford is, to me, always a fascinating team. Shaw's a good coach. I'm going to go with Stanford because if Delore gets knocked out of that game, somehow they're in a heap of trouble. So, Washington State will put up a good fight, but I'm picking the trees. I don't know. I'm still having trouble after all these years not calling the Stanford Indians, but then again, I understand where we are in today's world. All right, perhaps the second most intriguing game of the weekend is the Westwooders, aka UCLA, at Washington. That's 5:30 p.m. on Fox. UW is a 2-point favorite. How do you see it, Mr. Culkin?
I'm kind of with you, Greg. I think UW has turned the corner. They've found their identity. They're at home. UCLA is who they are. And so go Huskies.
All right, the barking dogs. Kevin, are the dogs going to bark?
This is one of those games where, gosh, I'd sure like to see Washington do well, but I see the Baby Blues pulling this one out.
Well, Eric, are the Baby Blues going to pull it out?
No, I think Washington wins that at home. You always get that kind of UCLA swoon after good starts. I think this continues it.
I think Washington is a very unpredictable team like UCLA. There's times when I think Washington is not bad, and there's times when I think that they are bad. UCLA has a lot to prove. This could be the crossroads game for them and maybe Chip Kelly down the road. I keep thinking that UCLA is going to find it. I think if UCLA gets the lead, they're going to win. Okay, well, obviously, if they get the lead, they're going to win. They have more points. But I think emotionally, if they're in that second half and Husky Stadium is quieted a little bit, which is hard to do, I think UCLA has a good chance. So I'm going to make a fool out of myself, not the first time. I'm going to go with UCLA on this one, and we'll see how that goes. So that'll be an interesting one. Now, the key game as far as the Pac-12 South is going to be ASU at Utah. And boy, the odds makers, that game, by the way, 7 p.m. on ESPN. ASU is a 1-point favorite. I think that's. I got to hear what this panel has to say. What do you think about it, Mark?
I got Utah. They're back at home. They're coming off their big win in LA in over 100 years. They're also riding a little bit of that Aaron Lowe emotion still. And yeah, they know that they control their own destiny for the Pac-12 South. So beating ASU is, that's up there on their checkoff list. So yeah, I got Utah actually winning easily at home.
Wow, easily. All right, Kevin, are they going to win easily?
No, I think ASU also controls the destiny of the South. So it's just, 1 versus 2, if you will. I think what we saw from Utah against this past Saturday, I have to say I was not overly impressed with the whole setup of their offense. I was more impressed, the lack of, with our inability to defend it, making a pretty good quarterback, but not a great quarterback, look fantastic. Almost 80% completion percentage. Are you kidding me? They're not going to see that in Utah. Now, Utah is a tough, Rice-Eccles is a tough place to play. Okay, I understand that. I see Arizona State winning. I think it's like a last possession type win. I'll give it that. And I just there's no, I have no animus toward Utah necessarily. I just think Arizona State is also in control of their destiny and has really plays some really good football. There are some external factors that could hit home, and that's an unknown. So I don't factor that into my prediction there.
Eric, what do you factor into your prediction?
Ultimately, I think Arizona State wins there. I think, like what Mark was saying with the emotional stuff, I think at a certain point that could be a difficult thing. Your first home game after the Aaron Lowe tragedy, and you're coming off this. They put so much emotion into that win against USC, and you kind of see it all the time. Teams jump up, they beat SC, and then they have that lull, I guess, that down week coming off of that. Utah, they should be ready. Like you're saying, the Pac-12 South as open as it's been, and when that's been the case, Utah has been one of those teams to step up and win the South. But it's asking a lot for them to put back-to-back emotional games together and win that at home. Everything, night game at Rice-Eccles and against Arizona State, everything points to that being a fantastic atmosphere. But Arizona State, I think, is playing well. They've got that run game, and if Jaden Daniels, has a good game, I think, like Kevin's saying, you can maybe expect a step back from Cameron Rising, the Utah quarterback, and if that happens, Arizona State, I think, is good enough to win there.
Well, I'll tell you what, I have flip-flopped listening to you gentlemen give your perspectives, and I've actually been going both ways listening to it, but I'll tell you, Rice-Eccles Stadium is really a pit, and I've been there so many times. It's an amazing place when it's rocking, and it'll be rocking. I think about Utah. Are they the team of destiny with all the tragedy? If they play their style of ball, they're going to win. ASU is one of the teams that can match Utah physically. They outdo them. The ASU running backs are really tough. You never know what Jaden Daniels is going to do with the football. But if he got knocked out of the game, that could change the equation. It's really about what team is going to be most consistent with what they do. And if it was an ASU, I would say ASU is going to win. But if Utah can play their style of ball and eat the clock at the same time, I think that ASU could be very frustrated. ASU has a good secondary, but I think this could be the Utah's year in terms I don't think they're going to have a letdown. That's my opinion. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a shot in the dark, and I'm going to go with Utah because I think that ASU will play inconsistent through 4 quarters. They'll look really great sometimes, and they'll look really stupid others. And I think Utah knows who they are and what they are, and they will eke it out some way, somehow, and the zoo, Maze or Maz or whatever they call themselves will go wild when they do. So, all right. Well, listen, guys, and thank you to all of you, all the listeners, all of the people that have been supporting the Inside the Trojans Huddle on YouTube and various other social platforms, and those, of course, on WeAreSC.com, the website. A reminder again that USC has a bye week this week, but will return to action at Notre Dame on October 23rd. And a reminder again, next Tuesday, we'll have a special Notre Dame edition of WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle. So until next Tuesday, I want to thank the panel. I want to thank our On3 technician, Jake Evans, and thank all of you for watching and listening wherever you may be. And remember, folks, there's still a half a season to play. A lot of things that are still low-hanging fruit, hopefully, for the Trojans. And until then, fight on, everybody.